but since I've started writing again, I've returned to poetry. For me, poetry grows just out of what I'm feeling, envision, or even if it's just cloudy in my head, it can come out. When I'm doing prose, I feel like I have to know the character well, have a sense of what he wants, where he comes from, what he needs. But poetry isn't like that at all. It just arrives in some way. It can spring from an experience, it can spring from a dream, it can spring from an observation. Anywhere the seeds of poetry lie. And for me, at least at this moment in my life, that is the process that I feel like I need to use in order to create and use words to share what is going on inside of me and how I see the world. Poetry is a way of connecting and communicating, just as any of the arts. It tends to be more cryptic. So when I teach poetry, students tend to say, I don't get this, yes, or I'm afraid of this, or let's read a story instead. But I think if we can put all that aside and understand, the first reading is just however it hits you, so that you just be open to it, just like listening to music. I think poetry is closest to music than anything else.
I see.
Because we talk about rhythm, we talk about sound, and that to me is very much like music. And I think music, we don't need to figure out, well, what is going on and why is this here and is there a story that's unfolding or I need to know this character. It's just how we respond emotionally to it is enough. If we want to go deeper, as students do at Berkeley, in their classes, they understand it, they learn about harmony and all of that, right? And so with poetry, we can return to poetry and break it down and understand why the words are the way they are and why they're formed in certain stanzas and all of that. But it's not necessary. I think it's the emotional response can be enough.
I see.
So for me, that's why I think poetry is a beautiful thing, because I think I'm as closest to who I am and how I connect with the world through poetry rather than prose, which again, I have to be a little bit more objective, I think, and understand the particulars of setting and plot and those things. Not to say I don't revise.
That's
not to say that.
Yeah.
Do you do process? I work.
You
yes,
do revise?
I do.
Honestly?
I do. When I write, I just first write, and that's it, and I leave them. And then I will return, and I can return again and again and again. It depends how many times. Sometimes I can't. I know I sense there's something amiss, but I can't get it, and so it means it's just not the time to do it. I think we have to give ourselves leeway as artists, that if we do not have to work at a timetable, then that's a great thing, and then don't feel pressure to do that. Mm-hmm. So some of these poems I revisited months and months after I first wrote them.
Amazing.
So, yeah.
Two things, Helen, and I'm sure because I'm so curious, you're going to forgive my ignorance and educate me. When I was preparing for this interview, just by a pure accident, I received a poem today, I think, today, as a matter of fact, from one of my brightest students at Brown, who is now at the University of London in Europe, who is studying sociology. But she decided to experiment with poetry. Mm-hmm. And she sent me a piece, 3 stanzas, I think, in which she says that it took her 6 months to develop it. That's one. And about 2 weeks ago, I had a poet professionally, but I did not invite him really to do poetry, but to speak about Haiti, who is a Haitian. But then I managed to have him read some of his poems. And then he, contrary to my student at Brown, told me that most of his pieces are first and last drafts. 2 diametrically opposed relationships to writing poetry.
My son is like that man. Mm-hmm. He'll just write a poem and that's it. He's
Once.
Like, yep, that's it. So I actually asked him to read my poems, because I trust his judgment, because he is a good poet. He is. There's brevity of speech. He just gets at that in such a simple way, whatever that thing is. So he did look at my poetry and supported my revision process. But yeah, I mean, it's different personalities. It's different how it's a thought process. It's like any student. You and me, we probably process information differently. And so, you know, for me, I'm someone that is a slow processor. And when I have something in front of me, I read it out loud. I'm hearing it one way, but I'm also imagining it another. It takes me a while to do it. That's just who I am. For my son, when it comes to the creative process, he can somehow things click together for him, and in that particular process, he is there. Maya Angelou, for example, I always do this interview that I share with my students when she talks about her writing process. It's a very old interview, probably 25 years old, but I like it anyway. And she talks about how 3 lines of a poem would take her 6 months. We use the figure 6 months, so that's that for 3 lines. And she talks about it as a struggle. Her language is beautiful. She talks about when she's going through the revision process that she has to kick it and hug it and hate it and love it. It's like an organic process, as if she's in a relationship with someone. And I think that's a beautiful thing, because in particular, poetry is like that. It is so much a part of us. I mean, any art, of course, is. But again, as I think I said at the beginning, for me, poetry is like the closest to the unspoken, because it doesn't fall into the natural elements of fiction that we talk about.
Because my impressions of you as someone who has edited my work is that you're very, very critical of first drafts. You insist that they're drafted and drafted again and again.
Well, it's because I care about you, Tedros.
Amazing.
I mean, I would not want to be dishonest with you, so, right? So I think that's probably why, because I know we all want to do the best we can do, so it's a matter of trust if you share it with someone else, if they're honest with you.
That's wonderful. I would have never expected you to approve of this poetic impulse that produces first works on first trial. I thought you would simply categorically oppose that. And yet I saw another side of you, namely that you do then allow differences of the production process, because the human imagination works in so many different ways. For some, as it is clearly the case with your son, it's the first impulse that produces perfect work. For others, great writers would tell you that they write 10, 12 drafts. The shorts that I have published with your help have been written at least 8 times. At least 8. And then when I began working with you, the drafts even became more, because I would even revise them more. So it's remarkable, and when you do your own work, I wouldn't have expected anything less. It appears that you do hug it, love it, look at it, put it away, revisit it, write it, rewrite it, subtract, multiply, add, so forth and so on. So now we'll move to the actual performance, to what it means to write a poem. Would you like to share with us a few of your poems?
Sure. I don't know which ones.
I would love to read some of them. Would do them in turns, I think.
Okay.
You'd read one, and then we'll talk about it, and then I'll read one, and then we'll talk about it more.
All right. So, am I going first or you?
Of course, that you go first. It's your work.
Well, I believe in sharing here. Okay. Okay. I'll just read it. Okay. It's called Jump. Why don't you jump, she taunts, as I perch toes clasping the roof's edge, 13 stories up. I was always superstitious, never brave. A misty fog thins, my eyes watch my body fall, yet I do not gasp. How many times have I fallen before? At least she had something to say about it. It takes a lot to get noticed. Lives slip through our fingers like bathwater. We are surprised to see our cupped hands empty, still wet, but nothing more. I have tried to hold on to voices